G'day legends, I hope that you're doing well. Now, we'll have a chat and then we'll go over the maps and have a look at a few other things. Now, I will say I had some interest in heading over to Sudan to report on what's happening there, but financially and time-wise, regrettably, I can't currently head over. And unlike social media, I will say that I'm not knowledgeable yet to form an opinion on the subject and really report on exactly what is happening, as violence has broken out in the last 24 hours between the army and the government's paramilitary rapid response forces. So what I found is this statement from the UK, and I think this is fairly neutral. So the United Kingdom strongly condemns the ongoing violence between the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid response forces in Khartoum. That multiple cities across Sudan. It must stop immediately. The UK expresses its heartfelt regret for the loss of innocent lives by those caught up in this violence and calls on the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces to cease all hostilities against each other. Now is the time for the Sudanese leadership to de-escalate tensions and prevent further bloodshed. The UK calls on Sudanese leadership to return to dialogue after months of fruitful political discussion and real progress towards a return of a civilian-led transition. Military action is not the solution. Long-term peace is possible, but only through open, honest and pragmatic discussion. The UK stands in solidarity with the people of Sudan in their demands for peaceful and democratic future. Innocent civilians should not pay the price of their futures due to this violence. Poland and Hungary have decided to ban imports, or at least temporarily ban imports, of grain and some other product from neighbouring Ukraine to protect their own local agricultural sector. As a measure to keep the Ukrainian economy rolling through this war, a lot of import-export taxes in Ukraine were dropped in all kinds of industry. Now, this has greatly undercut the grain and other products in competing countries like Poland and Hungary, threatening their own agricultural industry. Now, Poland's leader of Law and Justice Party has said, "We are and remain unchanged friends and allies of Ukraine. We will support her and we support her. But it is the duty of every state, every authority, good authority in any case, to protect the interests of its citizens." Now, earlier in this war, I was shocked at the amount of luxury cars entering Ukraine on trucks. Everything from Mercedes and Ferraris at the border crossing into Ukraine because of all car import taxes were dropped. And this is like a lot of things that really shocked me about war that I hadn't experienced in a wide war like this. I've spent a lot of time in Ukraine, both on the front lines and in cities both before the invasion and after the invasion. And it's always been weird to me the difference only a few miles can make. Now, when I was in Kyiv, we came off the front line getting shells, rockets, shooting. There was, further on the front, there would have been people dying. It was a crazy situation. And then we drove about maybe 20 minutes north from there, and we were able to go to a bar where there was young people meeting, guys meeting girls, girls meeting guys. We had a beer. We still had armbands on. You can look up the video if you look up when I was in Kyiv. We, were under fire in that area. And we still had, armbands on, press patches, whatever. And we rock up to a bar that just seemed like any other local bar like this. And that's something I tell a lot of people is life goes on in these cities, and it's not like people would think. If I picked you up right now and dropped you in Kyiv or somewhere like that, it would just seem normal. And I know being in Kharkiv after when it was, or at least the surrounding area was then liberated, as Russia never had control of Kharkiv, but almost encircled at one point. But once they got pushed back, going into Kharkiv, and you could hear shelling in the distance, and those shells are killing people. But you'd sit there having a pizza and having a beer and chilling out. It's so weird. But what I sort of came into mind and talking to some people was the world wars were no different. If you're out, outside that targeted artillery, not even outside artillery range, but out of where that targeted artillery is, life is normal after, the first sort of shock few weeks of that war goes on. And even looking at differences in just the sex that you're born, men are on the front line, dying in the thousands, conscripted by the tens of thousands to fight no matter of their military history or experience, while women can go into Europe safely, continue living their life during and after the war. But one thing is, I've never heard a single feminist or, normally very loud equality group get riled up about this. And this male conscription applies to both sides. And don't think for a second that when the West enters a war, and it's just a matter of time until we do enter a war, whether it be 1 year, 20 years, 30 years, but we will, that will be any different at all. And as it relates to this, we're going to talk about the intel update from the British MOD. Now, on 11th of April 23, the Russian State Duma adopted a law establishing a unified registry of individuals eligible for military service. The key implication of the measure is that in future, the authorities will be able to serve call-up papers electronically rather than by letter, removing one obstacle which has previously allowed some to dodge the draft. With individuals' call-up data now digitally linked to other state-provided online services, it is likely that the authorities will punish draft dodgers by automatically limiting employment rights and restricting foreign travel. The measures are reported to be coming into force later in the year. They do not specifically indicate any major new wave of enforced mobilization. Russia is, for now, prioritizing a drive to recruit extra volunteer troops. However, the measure is highly likely part of a longer-term approach to provide personnel as Russia anticipates a lengthy conflict with Ukraine. And I've seen people who have moved out into countries like Georgia that would accept people from Russia coming in, specifically males, that this could be a massive problem because they can't get served the draft letter, by person or via mail. Now it can be done online and can limit certain things. So this is a big deal, but it is not saying that it is to, bump up any numbers. It is just really at the moment, in case they need to do that, as they're still doing a lot of a lot of drive to get volunteer troops. And, as people won't tell you, but there's still a lot of troops volunteering for this as well. Now, let's not stuff around and have a look at the map. So, of course, in the center we have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv, the red area occupied since 22, the purple since 14, and the green liberated by Ukraine since the beginning of the 22 invasion. We've got Romania, Warsaw, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. So, we'll come into Bakhmut. Now, I can tell you today is the 16th, and the map updated maybe about 4 hours ago. I'm a bit late on this one today, but we haven't seen any major movements. If we roll back to yesterday, all we see is across the train line in the north part of Bakhmut, we just see Russia come up across to the west of this train line, which we know is a stronghold, really limiting further and further positions of the Ukrainian armed forces in Bakhmut. Now, along up and down the front line, at least on Deep State Map, we have not seen any other changes on this. And I've watched a few other YouTube videos of people claiming massive offensives by Ukraine, massive loss by Wagner, things like this over the past 24 hours. And they don't really have any source for that I can see. So I watched some of this and I'm like, I don't really know what's going on. I don't see any geolocated footage of this. I don't see any footage of this. So I'm a bit limited on what is actually happening in here. I know there's grinding of hundreds of thousands of men in this region, but these massive claims of, Wagner being completely cut off and everything in this region, I personally don't believe at all. And as well, they fail to provide any actual evidence of this. But let's have a look in Bakhmut as well from the ISW map. And what we'll do is, excuse my bloody head, but we'll pull up my map from yesterday of the same map. Now, it is showing almost the exact same, if not the exact same to yesterday. So we haven't really seen any changes in Bakhmut over the past 24 hours, really anywhere, and up and down the front line, haven't seen anything. So it's been a very slow day up and down the front line. Now, one area we do know has heavy clashes every day is Marinka. Yesterday to today, didn't see anything. We did see Russia advancing through Marinka fairly quickly, but it has seemed to stall out. Very similar to somewhere like Avdiivka, and similar in a way to Bakhmut. Now, we know Russia is making ground by road to road, maybe a couple of roads every day in Bakhmut, which does go against this idea of Bakhmut holds, but it also does definitely go against the idea that Bakhmut is absolutely folding as well. Months and months, and you're only taking roads at a time. But what we do have from here, I've closed my map, is some footage from the Russian forces in Marinka. As you can see, preparing some level of anti-tank weapon here, and coming out in these ruined buildings to fire this at something. And now you can see just the devastation. This is on a tank in here of Marinka, the close fighting among tanks, and just look at the absolute ruins of this once, lively living city. And you and I have gone over Google Maps and looked at a number of areas here before as well. Now, this is something interesting, and I should say I realistically have no bloody idea what this is, but what I'm going to say it is, judging by this look like antenna and some level of electronic battery thing, I'm going to say that this is some sort of level of anti-drone weapon, as we're seeing these pop up on the Ukrainian side and the Russian side to counter these cheap DJI drones that are having a massive effect on this war. And just tanks rolling through absolute devastation of this city. It is just bloody unbelievable. This video is to AC/DC in the background. Now, Ukraine and Russia must love the Australian band AC/DC, as Ukraine's most recent video of trying to get Hawkei vehicles from Australia also had backing track of AC/DC. Now, the Hawkei is an awesome looking vehicle. Is it battle tested? Really even that field tested? No, not like the Australian Bushmaster, which we sent to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians reportedly absolutely loved the Bushmaster, a protected mobility vehicle. We've seen a number of those killed as well. But the idea that, these are going to make a huge game change, not really. That's not like tanks. A Bushmaster, I was a crew commander of a Bushmaster in Afghanistan for 9 months, so I think I have some degree to actually talk on this as well. They're great vehicles, don't get me wrong, but they are for protected mobility, for moving around behind the real front line in a war like this. Yes, they will take 50 cal on the windscreen for a couple of rounds and will stop that, but any level of anti-armor weapon, any bigger than 50 cal, will open that thing up like a tuna can, not for this, for moving 2 crew, 8 troops around. But they're a very good vehicle, very reliable for mines and for specifically IEDs in Afghanistan. Absolutely brilliant with the V-shaped hull, and were by far of that grouping of vehicle the best ones. When you're looking at Foxhounds, MRAPs, things like that, the Bushmaster, absolutely the best vehicle. And until they went to Ukraine, had no deaths inside the vehicle. So no one had been killed in those vehicles from explosions until they went to Ukraine and were hit by, of course, much heavier weapons such as tanks, mortars, things like that, things we didn't come up against. But Hawkeis. Now, Hawkeis aren't even in the wider Australian Army. The Hawkeis came in basically to replace Land Rovers. Now, more units are getting the Hawkeis. When I left only 2 years ago, I'd only seen 2 Hawkeis in my entire career. When the Prime Minister of Australia came over to Afghanistan, I actually wasn't there for this, but he was on my base. I was out. He asked, you've got the Bushmasters. Where are the Hawkeis you're using? Apparently, the guys were like, no, sir, we don't even have the Hawkeis. We haven't even seen them. We're still using up-armoured Land Cruisers. And I was like, oh, shit, I was told you were using them. So that was a bit funny. But these are definitely not like the norm yet throughout the military. So if Ukraine was to get sent them, they would be before even coming to an Australian unit, which, whatever. People may have a problem with that, but whatever. But they're definitely not tested in any battlefield at all, or really even widely fielded by the Australian Army yet. So maybe they could look at it as, this is great battle testing for us, or we don't really know how they'll perform yet. So I don't really know how that decision will be. I haven't heard any response from the government of actually sending these vehicles yet, but I know these vehicles did have a number of issues when they came. Mainly, most embarrassingly, the spare tyre didn't come with the spare tyre, so for an amount of time, had to tow a trailer with a spare tyre on it in case they did blow one of the run-flat tyres. But I'm really not sure. These vehicles, these are not going to be an offensive vehicle like a tank. These maybe for reconnaissance, maybe for moving troops on the front line, but as far as offensive vehicle, Bushmasters, Hawkeis, absolutely not that, and they will not turn the tide of the war. What I could see more Australia doing is things like the M113 AS4, and M113 is, a real pre-Vietnam armoured vehicle, one of the most widely dispersed vehicles in the world. We call them buckets, but we basically cut 2 in half and made an AS4, which is one more road wheel, which you can tell on the Australian variants of these. And we've got hundreds of them basically in Australia, all being replaced by South Korean or German, way more modern vehicles. And I could see more of them. We've already sent some to Ukraine, but I could see absolutely more of them getting sent over to Ukraine as well. And they are more of an offensive weapon. I guess we've seen Ukraine use M113s very widely across the front line from America, from a number of European countries. So that could be more on the cards. But that's just my little bits of information. So in other news, the Brazilian president has been in meetings with the Chinese President Xi over the past couple of days and has discussed forming a group of like-minded leaders on Ukraine. Now, both China and Brazil are part of the emerging economic powerhouse of BRICS, which is not a defense org like NATO, although people love to compare the two. They're not similar. But this is an economic alliance, not a defensive alliance like NATO. But as I say, BRICS is to promote peace, security, development, and cooperation. Now, Brazilian president has said the United States needs to stop encouraging war and start talking about peace. The European Union needs to start talking about peace so that we can convince Putin and Zelensky that peace is in the interest of everyone. And the war is only interesting for now to the two of them. I have a theory that I have already defended with Macron, with Olaf Scholz of Germany, and with Biden. Yesterday, we discussed at length with Xi Jinping it is necessary to constitute a group of countries willing to find a way to make peace. Ukraine has stated that no talks will take place as long as Putin remains in power. But legends, that's all I've got for you today. If you'd like to support me, feel free through the links below, but never feel obliged at all. So look after yourself. Hope you're having a great weekend and not have too many Sunday blues into the working week tomorrow. So look after yourselves, but I'll speak to you tomorrow as well. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.